So, here's my story. A couple of years ago, I matched with this guy named Jake on Tinder. I'm Emma, by the way. Just your typical young professional living in the city, trying to balance work and social life, and like most people these days, using dating apps to meet new people. Jake's profile was charming. He had this perfect mix of good looks, wit, and a bit of mystery. We started chatting, and he seemed really nice, funny, engaging, and interested in all the right things. After a few days of messaging back and forth, we decided to meet up for coffee. I mean, why not, right? Coffee's harmless. Our first date went well. We talked about our jobs, our favorite movies, even our favorite places to grab a bite in the city. He was polite and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We went on a few more dates after that. A dinner, a movie night, a walk in the park. He was attentive and sweet, but I started to notice some red flags. Jake would get a little too intense sometimes. Like, he'd text constantly and get a bit upset if I didn't respond right away. I tried to brush it off at first, thinking maybe he was just really into me, but it started to feel suffocating. After a month or so of dating, I decided to break things off. I just didn't feel the same way he did, and it wasn't fair to string him along. I called him and explained how I felt. He seemed to take it well over the phone, saying he understood and wished me the best. I thought that was the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. A few days later, I noticed Jake at my favorite coffee shop. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he liked the place too, right? But then, I saw him again at my gym, and then again at a bar I frequented with friends. It was starting to get creepy. He began sending me gifts, flowers, chocolates, even a necklace. I never told him my address, so I had no idea how he found it. I texted him, politely asking him to stop, and he apologized, saying he just wanted to make things right. I blocked him on social media and hoped that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. He started showing up at my work. My colleagues would tell me a friend was waiting for me in the lobby, and there he'd be, with some excuse about just wanting to talk. I told him firmly that we were over, and that he needed to stop contacting me. He acted all hurt, but I didn't care anymore. This was getting out of hand. The breaking point came one night when I came home to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart dropped. I slowly pushed the door open, and there he was, sitting on my couch. Jake, in my apartment, uninvited. He had this eerie calmness about him, like he thought this was perfectly normal. I was terrified but tried to keep my cool. I told him he needed to leave, that this was not okay. He started talking about how much he loved me, how we were meant to be together, and how he couldn't live without me. I felt sick to my stomach. I managed to get him out of the apartment, but I was shaking. I locked the door and called the police immediately. They arrived, took my statement, and thankfully, Jake was still lingering around the building. They arrested him for breaking and entering. I filed a restraining order against him, and the whole process was exhausting and emotionally draining. For months, I was paranoid, always looking over my shoulder, scared he'd show up again. The police assured me they'd keep an eye on things, but the fear didn't go away overnight. Eventually, things settled down. I moved to a new apartment, changed my number, and made my social media profiles private. I had to take all these precautions just to feel safe again. It was a nightmare, but I learned a lot about being cautious with who I let into my life. So, that's my story. A seemingly charming guy turned stalker. It's a harsh reminder to trust your instincts and prioritize your safety. You never really know who you're dealing with, even if they seem perfect on the surface. Stay safe out there. Enjoying the content? Subscribe now for more. You know, I've always been a bit skeptical about online dating, but after seeing so many of my friends find success on Tinder, I decided to give it a shot. I mean, what's the worst that could happen, right? Little did I know how my life was about to turn upside down. It all started with a match. Mark. His profile was perfect, charming smile, an adventurous spirit, and those warm, inviting eyes. We started chatting, and he seemed too good to be true. He was funny, attentive, and always knew the right thing to say. We had this instant connection, you know? It felt like we'd known each other for years. Our first date was at this cute little coffee shop downtown. I remember walking in and seeing him already seated, looking just as handsome as his pictures. We hit it off immediately, talking about everything from our favorite books to our travel bucket lists. It was like a scene out of a rom-com. He was perfect. For the next few weeks, we were inseparable. We went on spontaneous road trips, had picnics in the park, and even took a weekend getaway to a cabin by the lake. Every moment with him felt magical. But then, little things started to feel off. He'd cancel plans last minute with vague excuses about work emergencies. His stories about his past didn't quite add up. One minute he was talking about a childhood in Maine. The next he mentioned growing up in California. And he was always evasive about his home life, never inviting me over, always suggesting we meet at my place or somewhere public. At first, I brushed it off. I mean, everyone has a past, right? But the inconsistencies kept piling up, and my gut was screaming that something wasn't right. One night, we were supposed to go to a friend's party together, but he bailed last minute, claiming he was stuck at work. I decided to do a little digging. I started with his social media. His profiles were oddly bare, but I managed to find a few tagged photos. One picture, in particular, stood out. It was a family photo, posted by a woman named Emily. She was tagged as his wife, and the kids in the photo looked just like him. My heart sank. I couldn't believe it. I felt like my whole world was crashing down. Here I was, falling for this guy while he was living a double life. I knew I had to confront him, but I wanted to gather as much information as possible first. I reached out to Emily, posing as a friend from work. We arranged to meet at a cafe. Meeting Emily was surreal. She was sweet, friendly, and had no idea what was going on. She showed me more photos and talked about their life together. They'd been married for 10 years, had 2 beautiful kids, and she had no clue about Mark's secret life. My heart broke for her. I finally decided to confront Mark. I invited him over one night, determined to get the truth. As soon as he walked in, I showed him the photos and asked him straight out. The look on his face said it all. He tried to lie at first, spinning some ridiculous story about a separation, but I wasn't buying it. Things escalated quickly. He got defensive, then angry, and finally, he stormed out. I called Emily right away and told her everything. She was devastated but grateful for the truth. They separated shortly after, and I cut off all contact with Mark. It was a tough time, but I leaned on my friends and family for support. They helped me through the heartbreak and betrayal. Looking back, I realized how important it is to trust your instincts and pay attention to red flags. I decided to share my story, hoping it would help others avoid falling into the same trap. So, if you're out there, navigating the wild world of online dating, remember this. Trust your gut, do your research, and don't ignore the warning signs. There are good people out there, but there are also those who will deceive you without a second thought. Stay safe, and don't let your guard down. You know, online dating can be a real roller coaster. I've had my fair share of ups and downs, but nothing prepared me for what happened with Tom. I still can't believe I fell for it. So it all started on Tinder. I matched with Tom, and he seemed perfect. His profile was impressive, a successful entrepreneur, world traveler, and he had this irresistible charm. We started chatting, and it felt like we clicked instantly. We talked about everything, our dreams, our favorite movies, even our childhood memories. It was like he was genuinely interested in me, and I started to let my guard down. For weeks, we messaged back and forth, and every conversation made me feel closer to him. He shared stories about his business ventures, how he built his company from the ground up, and the challenges he faced. I admired his drive and ambition. He was so different from anyone I'd met before. One evening, after a particularly deep conversation, Tom opened up about a financial rough patch he was going through. He said his latest business deal had fallen through, and he was struggling to make ends meet. He sounded embarrassed and vulnerable, and my heart went out to him. I wanted to help. At first, he didn't ask for anything. He just shared his troubles, and I offered a listening ear. But after a few days, he mentioned needing a loan to tide him over until his next project came through. He was hesitant, almost ashamed to ask, but I could sense his desperation. By this point, I felt so connected to him that I wanted to support him in any way I could. I know it sounds crazy, but I believed in our connection. I believed in him. So, I transferred him the money. It wasn't a small amount, but I thought it was worth it to help someone I cared about. He was so grateful, and he promised to pay me back as soon as he could. But then, things started to change. Tom became less responsive, and our conversations grew shorter and more sporadic. He always had an excuse. Work was demanding. He was dealing with family issues. He was traveling. I tried to be patient and understanding, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. After a few weeks of this, Tom vanished. His profile disappeared, his phone number was disconnected, and he stopped replying to my emails. Panic set in. I felt a knot in my stomach as the reality of the situation dawned on me. I had been scammed. I felt devastated and foolish. How could I have been so naive? I blamed myself for trusting him, for ignoring the red flags. But I couldn't just let it go. I needed to know the truth. I started digging. I searched online for any information about Tom, his business, anything that could give me a clue. What I found was worse than I imagined. Tom, or whatever his real name was, had conned several other women in the same way. He'd created a web of lies, preying on women looking for love and exploiting their trust. I connected with a few of his other victims through online forums and support groups. Hearing their stories was heartbreaking and infuriating. We all felt betrayed, used, and humiliated. But sharing our experiences also gave us a sense of solidarity. We weren't alone in this. I reported him to the authorities, but I knew the chances of getting my money back were slim. The experience left me shaken and wary of trusting anyone new. I put up emotional walls and withdrew from online dating altogether. It took a long time to rebuild my confidence and sense of self-worth. Now, when I look back on that time, I realize how important it is to be cautious and vigilant, especially when it comes to online relationships. It's easy to get swept up in the excitement and connection, but it's crucial to protect yourself and not ignore the warning signs. If there's one thing I've learned, it's to trust my instincts and never let my guard down completely. There are good people out there, but there are also those who will take advantage of your kindness and trust. I hope my story helps others avoid falling into the same trap. Stay safe and be careful out there.